Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 27 of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. I am Matthew King. Tristen Ellison hopping on to start this one because it is bowl season in the college football world. We are going to talk about the New Year's Six Bowls and, of course, college football playoff today. We're going to start things off with the Cotton Bowl, which is USC and Tulane. Now, this one, of course, there's always the non-Power 5 team that gets into a New Year's Six Bowl. It's what they have to do. This year, it's Tulane take on USC, who's coming off a letdown in the Pac-12 championship. Also, they're going to be without a lot of starters for this game, but we kind of talked about it right before we started recording. It's still Lincoln Riley. It's still Tulane. Lincoln Riley is a very good coach. He knows how to get a lot out of his players. He knows how to score points. I just don't think Tulane can keep up with USC, but man, for everything that USC had going for them, it's got to feel like a little bit of a letdown just playing in the Cotton Bowl this season.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I mean, they were ranked fourth when it came to the Pac-12 title game, and they played a team that they'd previously played this year and lost to. It's the only team that they've lost to all year is Utah. And it was just same thing that happened earlier in the season. They just couldn't figure out how to beat Utah, which is ironically the same thing that happened to Oregon last year. Also crushed USC's college football playoff hopes. If USC wins that game, they're playing in the playoffs, unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. But at the end of the day, like you just said, Lincoln Riley is Lincoln Riley. There's a reason he has 3 Heisman quarterbacks in the past, I think it's 5 seasons, 4 Heisman finalists. And it's because he can develop quarterbacks at a high level. He's just one of those coaches that is able to, no matter who he's got, they're going to be solid. And Tulane, I mean, got to give love to the power or the group of 5 non-Power 5 schools, but I think USC's got this one in the bag.
Yeah, I just don't see any way Tulane can keep up with the firepower. USC's second string should still be able to put up points. The only thing I am worried about is USC's got to come in a little bit motivated, which I think they still do. It's still a New Year's Six Bowl, which is a big deal for many a team. So I think USC will be just fine in the motivation department, and I think they get the job done.
Another thing, though, is I question USC's defense because the USC's defense this year hasn't exactly looked amazing. And that'd be another question mark. See if the Green Wave can figure something out there and just come out firing on offense. But I still think USC's got it.
The next bowl game we are going to talk about, the Orange Bowl, which features 2 orange teams, which is kind of ironic. Tennessee taking on Clemson in this one. No, it's not DJ against Hendon Hooker. It is Joe Milton against Cade Klubnik. So it's a little bit different. The big difference is Klubnik's been playing now for a little bit. He's looked much better than Milton has. Not that Milton's played terrible, but I just think this Clemson team is starting to click. They're playing their best football of the season now. I still believe they're a little bit overrated, but I think that they are going to get the job done again. As soon as Hendon Hooker went down, it just felt like this Tennessee season was going to fall apart. They're going to miss a lot of their starters for this bowl game as well. It was a dream season for the Volunteers. They beat Bama. Unfortunately, Dabo Swinney, he's going to have his guys ready to go, and I think Clemson takes care of business.
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, Tennessee's one of those teams, just like USC, that they were looking really good up until late in the season. They take that huge loss to Georgia, which a score might not have been like, you just look at the score and it wasn't that bad. But if you were to watch the game, it was Georgia dominating the entire game, like just flat out handing it to Tennessee. Hendon Hooker gets that injury, then maybe it's a different game, but at the end of the day, they lost. And then Clemson's been a team that I've thought for basically the entire season was overranked. I think DJ was a good quarterback, and maybe he's just in the wrong system, but we'll see because he's now in the transfer portal. But from what I saw of Klubnik in the few games I watched of Clemson's, was he's a pretty solid quarterback, and I'm pretty sure that he's going to be able to get it done against Hendon Hookerless Tennessee.
Now let's move to the Sugar Bowl, which you want to talk about a team that might not be motivated for this one. Alabama taking on Kansas State. Kansas State's coming off a massive win. You talked about it before we went on air, beating TCU. That is a big win for Kansas State. It gets them that Big 12 championship, gets them a massive opportunity against Alabama, who was really hoping that they'd sneak into the college football playoff. We'll talk about whether we think they deserve it or not here in just a little bit. But it's Alabama. They're so deep. It doesn't matter if Bryce Young plays, Will Anderson plays. Everyone who's going to replace those guys is a 5-star athlete, an athlete that can go in the first round of the NFL draft. They are just made up of big-time playmakers. I think Alabama takes care of business in this one. I think they remind everyone, hey, we had a down year, but we're still Alabama. We're still that team to beat in college football.
Yeah, I'd agree. I said it once, and I'll keep saying it till the end of the time. Nick Saban is the greatest college football coach ever. What he's able to do and his dynasty that he's built has just been able to just bring in players and be successful doing it. Yes, very unfortunate year where he's had 2 losses to some pretty decent teams. I'm not going to say they're great teams, but pretty decent teams. And as far as Kansas State goes, their win against TCU was a very close win. I believe it went into overtime. And Max Duggan was just pouring his heart out into that game. It was pretty cool to see a quarterback like that just get so emotional over a game. Because you don't really get to see that too much. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Bama's second, third stringers could definitely handle K-State just because of recruiting and Nick Saban coaching and just developing these players, how he does. And one thing to worry about, though, is Bama's transfer portal. Quite a few players have hit the transfer portal. We'll see how much that affects them, but I don't really see it affecting it that much, and I think Bama wins this.
And we will have an episode coming up where we really talk about the transfer portal and NIL deals and all that stuff that goes into it. So that is coming because that is a big part of college football now. It's on its way. But we talked about Lincoln Riley being just a great coach. There's nobody who's going to outcoach Nick Saban. You're going to have to beat the players on the field. You're not going to be able to outthink them, trick them, or anything. So that's a key piece of this puzzle as well. You hit the nail right on the head. Nick Saban's going to be Nick Saban. Bama's going to be Bama. Let's go to the Rose Bowl. This one is really interesting. Penn State and Utah. Utah is back here in the Rose Bowl again. They fell short last year against Ohio State in what was probably the best game of the year, bowl game wise. It was incredible. They did fall short, though, but they're coming off a pretty emotional win, beating USC to win the Pac-12 title for a second consecutive season. This Utah defense always seems to play pretty well this year. I mean, it's been offensive issues that have cost them an opportunity to go on a run. You know, you look all the way back at that week 1 loss to Florida where the offense just struggled to get going that entire game. This defense, though, they're really good. I think they're going to take care of business against Penn State. Penn State is another one of those teams where I think they're a little bit overrated. I think they're looked at just because they're in the Big Ten. That was a weak Big Ten last year or this season. I mean, Purdue getting into the Big Ten championship kind of emphasized, especially that division, how weak it was. But I think there's a pretty big gap between Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State. I don't believe in Penn State that much. I think Utah gets the job done here, and they kind of right the wrong from last year. I think they use that as a lot of motivation because they have a lot of guys that were on that team last year back this year. So give me the Utes to win the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Utah, what Kyle Whittingham has got going down in Utah, he's had one of those teams that it's like they don't have they've got Cam Rising, who's a pretty solid quarterback, but they don't have that big, huge star player or this one big part of their team. It's like they're just as a whole, just a solid team that seems to carry out things effectively. And like you said, I'm pretty sure we've said this almost every single podcast now that the Big Ten is pretty much Michigan, Ohio State. and the rest is
Average.
pretty average. Not great, but I think Utah is going to have kind of a chip on their shoulder with coming into this game because there's still obviously some doubters as far as is Utah going to stick around? Is Utah going to be that good? Because they had their run last year, got to the Rose Bowl, lost. And I think if Utah comes into this Rose Bowl and ends up winning it, it's pretty much in cement that Utah is going to be sticking around for a while.
I think you nailed it there. Utah is a very good, they're not just a good team, they're a good program. Ever since, even when they were back in the Mountain West, it was them and BYU were right there every single year talking about if they were going to make the national championship. Also throw TCU in that mix too. That was a loaded conference back then, and Utah has not skipped a beat since joining the Pac-12. They've had some years where they've been a little bit down, but man, that is a prestigious program. It's a program that takes pride in what they put out on the field. Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches in the nation, one of the most underrated coaches in the nation, always has his guys ready to go. So, yeah, Utah is a team that I think one big win, and this could be it, will get a lot of national attention. Like, hey, look what this program's done, not just this year, but just their history. They're always really, really talented, always a top 25 team. So it's a big chance for Utah to kind of garner that attention on them a little bit as well.
Yeah, most definitely. I'd agree.
Now let's go to the college football playoff. And before we start talking about the games individually, we want to talk about the ranking of the four teams and whether we agree or not. So if you're not familiar, the top four were Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2, TCU at 3, and Ohio State at 4. I personally believe that the committee nailed it with what they were given, what the resume showed. This had to have been the top 4. You couldn't put Bama in there, a 2-loss non-conference champion in Alabama. I don't know how you put them over a 2-loss conference champion like a Utah or like a Kansas State, like a Clemson. There are just too many teams who had that conference champion attached to their resume. But I mean, there's no doubt about Georgia and Michigan, undefeated conference champions, no brainers. TCU, that one loss coming in their conference title game against Kansas State. And I'll let you explain why you think TCU is sticking around in there. I think you nailed it, what you're talking about off air. So I'll let you talk about that. But I mean, it was hard to move TCU out of that spot. And Ohio State got that spot at number 4 because of the USC loss. It really was going to come down to Ohio State and Bama. And I just talked about all the reasons Bama should have that 4th spot. Ohio State's lone loss of the season came to Michigan, who's number 2. Everyone else, they looked absolutely fantastic against. They're in the same division, so they didn't have the opportunity to go out and win the Big Ten title game. But Ohio State, they were clearly that number 4 team. The answer was pretty obvious. So I think with what they were given, the committee nailed it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, like you said, Georgia, Michigan, obviously 1-2. I think Georgia's obviously the number 1. They've dominated everybody all year, whether it's, like we said earlier, Tennessee or dominating Oregon, or everybody they've played, they've dominated. Or, I mean, there was the couple games where they played down to their opponent's level, but even those games, it was like there was no
question.
Yeah, it was never a question who was going to win that game. And then I believe they played LSU in the SEC title game, handled them. And then Michigan beating Purdue. Obviously just smoking Ohio State. It was just a smoke show there. With Ohio State's just outstanding offense, it was Michigan just destroying them physically. Like physically, Ohio State just couldn't handle them. And I think that's partially why TCU didn't move down to 4 after their loss. Because, well, another thing I'll get into, which is what we were talking about before, is TCU at 3 before their loss and after their loss obviously never changed. And I believe that is not because who's going to fill in for them or who did better than them, but it was like, who are you going to replace TCU with that deserves to be in the number 3 spot? Because like you said, it's a 2-loss Bama, didn't play in the conference title game. Tennessee didn't play in the conference title game. 2-loss Clemson. won the ACC, but again,
Weak ACC.
you can't put Clemson above TCU. And Utah, 2-loss conference champion, very good team, but not a number 3. So Ohio State, 1 loss, I think, is the correct answer to put in there at 4. And I think those are the 4 best teams, honestly.
The thing for me, I'm not sure that these are the 4 best teams, but again, with what they did this season, these were the 4 teams that you absolutely had to put in. I always think Alabama's a top 4 team, but they didn't deserve to be in it this year because of that big loss. If they wouldn't have lost to LSU, Bama would be in this college football playoff. There's no question about it in my mind. But that loss to LSU, that adding that second loss, the committee's made it known over the years, 2 losses is not going to get you in. We don't care who you are. So I think they did a good job of staying consistent with that, regardless of the branding attached to that team. Now let's actually dig into these games, because these are 2 really, really good games. We don't have to watch Notre Dame or Oklahoma get blown out this year, which is going to be absolutely fantastic.
Or a
Fiesta Bowl, though.
Or a Cincinnati that has absolutely no right to be there.
Yeah, these are going to be good games, we promise. The Fiesta Bowl kicks things off. Number 2 Michigan against number 3 TCU. Blake Corum being out really looked like it was going to derail Michigan's season, or at least make it a lot tougher. They played it pretty well throughout the season, even without him. TCU feels like a team of destiny, though, right now. Max Duggan has just been, you talked about it, he's been fun to watch. He's a guy who's easy to root for, kind of came out of nowhere, plays with emotion, going to leave everything he has out on the field. I think TCU is pretty physical as well. I don't think they're just going to get pushed around like Ohio State did. I think they're going to come out and they're going to smack Michigan in the face and see how the Wolverines respond. This is my upset. I think TCU knocks off Michigan. I really think this is where Michigan is going to miss Corum. I don't trust their passing game enough either. If it comes down to that late, Michigan needs a drive. I just don't trust it enough yet. So I'm going to take the quarterback I trust more, and that is Duggan and TCU.
Yeah, it's basically what I wrote down were a bunch of keys to the game as far as what team needs to do to win this game. And you hit it right on the head. For Michigan, I put JJ McCarthy has to be efficient, because to me, he's good, but he's a game manager. They're a physical run team that can do pretty well in the pass game if JJ McCarthy does well. Another big key would be Michigan's O-line. If Michigan's O-line does what Michigan O-line has done, then they're going to be very successful, because like you said, Blake Corum obviously was in top 10 Heisman, stud running back, but even with their backup, Donovan Edwards, he's had a 200-yard rushing game and a 180-yard rushing game, I believe, in the last 2 games. Just unbelievable what they can do. And I believe they were the Davey O'Brien Award winners last year and probably going to win it again this year. Michigan has to dominate the run game. They have to be able to set that tone. If TCU can stop the run game, then that's going to be the key factor on whether or not TCU can win this game, because I think if you make it a Max Duggan versus JJ McCarthy game, then Max Duggan's going to win that game, because like we were talking about earlier, JJ McCarthy has heart and grit, and he's just a tough, fun to root for guy. I made the comparison before we started, was Baker. He reminds me of Baker Mayfield, not necessarily in the play style or as far as like football wise, but like just his attitude and just how he is as a quarterback. His personality is just very Baker-esque. Another key for Michigan, though, is their depth. I think Michigan probably has a little bit more depth than TCU does, but we'll see how that pans out as far as the pace of the game and just how their game plans turn out.
So who do you got in this one, Michigan or TCU?
I've got TCU winning it. I think TCU is going to be able to stop Michigan's run, and Max Duggan's gonna go off.
All right, so we both have TCU advancing to the national championship. Now hop on over to the other semifinal. Georgia and Ohio State. And man, this game looks incredible on paper. Ohio State, that lingering memory of them just getting blown out by Michigan. That was their most recent game. They haven't been able to kind of right the wrongs from that game. Georgia, however, has just, you mentioned, they've looked dominant all season long. Everything they've done has been impressive from start to finish. The beginning of this game is so important for Ohio State. If they can come out and they can stay in it right out of the gate, make Georgia continue to have to score, then I think this game could swing into favor of Ohio State. If they come out and they have any hiccups at all, Georgia is going to go ahead and pick apart a pretty bad defense for the Buckeyes. They're going to get that lead, and they're just going to run the ball in the second half, control that clock, and not give Ohio State the opportunities that they need to get back into it. I think that's more likely than Ohio State keeping it a shootout. I think they're going to end up making a mistake. Georgia's going to capitalize and turn this into a pretty comfortable 2 or 3 score win for the Bulldogs. I think they're the best team in the nation, and I think they're going to play like it.
Yeah, I agree. I think what Michigan did to Ohio State kind of showed their weaknesses. I think Michigan's a pretty physical team, but Georgia's on a whole nother level of being physical. And I think that's going to be what ends up tearing down Ohio State. If Ohio State can get the big pass plays and beat those corners and safeties and DBs of Georgia, then I think that will be their key. And they have to have big plays often. Like, they have to turn this into a shootout because Ohio State is not going to win a physical run game matchup against Georgia in their front seven. And as far as Georgia, I mean, I wasn't very high on Stetson Bennett. I'm still not very high on Stetson Bennett. I think he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's a game changer quarterback like CJ Stroud is. But I think with the talent that Georgia has on offense, whether it's the entire tight end room of Georgia or one of the wide receivers or running backs, I think Georgia's offense is better than Ohio State's defense for sure.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I don't even think it's necessarily close. I think Ohio State's defense is very, very bad. They let a lot of teams score way more points than they should. I don't think it's on Ryan Day. I know a lot of people think Ryan Day should be fired. I think let's calm down a little bit. I think the reason he's lost to Michigan these last couple of years is because Michigan Wolverines have been pretty darn good. So I wouldn't put that on him. I give more credit to Michigan than, saying that it was because of Ryan Day there. Let's head to our national championship then. We got the same game. We both have Georgia and TCU playing for the Natty. This is where I think you really see that there's levels to college football. I think Georgia takes care of business. They have a team that's been there, done that. Stetson Bennett won the national championship last year. TCU, they haven't even really sniffed the college football playoff until this year. I just think the experience of Georgia is too much. Like you mentioned, their offense is just loaded with weapons from top to bottom. There's no weak spot on this team. You're going to have to go out there and you're just going to have to outplay them. And I don't think there's a team in the country that can. So I think Georgia has been the best team all year, and I think they end up winning the national championship.
I agree. I think Georgia dominated all year, and I don't really see them not dominating somebody. I think if I were to pick Ohio State or TCU to play Georgia, I would honestly say TCU would do better just because they're more of a physical team. But I still think that Georgia's going to handle it and end up winning the Natty just because of how physical and how deep they are and how outstanding of a coach Kirby Smart is. They're just on another level of teams. You can make a tier list, and every single time I'd put Georgia as a lone tier 1. Nobody else is on their level.
Well, there you have it. Both of us picking Georgia. I mean, we're both playing it safe, but I think this has been a pretty easy year. The writing's been on the wall that Georgia's the best team. If they don't take home a national championship, I think you can color everyone pretty surprised with that one. So that'll do it for our New Year's 6 and college football playoff conversation. Tristen will be back on. Again, we are going to talk about the transfer portal and the NIL deal. So college football, even when the season's done, we're not quite done. Also, we're going to have that talk about the Pac-12 and a Big Ten. USC and UCLA headed over there. So Tristen, thanks so much for hopping on all season long. We appreciate it and can't wait to see you in probably January, February to talk about transfer portal because, man, it's going to take a little bit to wrap my head around it.
Oh, for sure. Especially with, you got all this tampering and there's so much to talk about when it comes to transfer portal and NIL, and we got to let at least some of the transfer portal time play out, see who goes where and all the news that's going to come out of that too, for sure.
Exactly. All right, that'll do it for our college football segment. When we come back, Jacob's going to hop on. We got our Cleveland baseball Mount Rushmore. Again, there's gone by so many team names. We didn't want to just narrow it down to one. And then we have a special segment. It's the holiday season, so we have our naughty and nice list for some athletes and teams throughout 2022 year. You're not going to want to miss this one coming up on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast.
There are many ways for businesses to expand their customer base, but one of the tried and true ways of increasing customer loyalty and recognizing employees is to put your name and logo on promotional and motivational items. You can find a wide selection at Alderson's Awards West Printwares in Centralia. Shirts, hats, coats, mugs, pens, and more, all with high-quality screen printing or embroidery done on site. For a full catalog of items at great prices, go to aldersons.net, and remember, you will get maximum impact at Awards West Printwares. Since 1978, Rogers Key, Card, and Strophe has offered their clients excellent representation in all facets of legal areas as a general practice law firm. They're serving Thurston, Lewis, Mason, Pierce, and Grays Harbor counties. Our team of professionals' focus is on personal injury, family law, criminal defense and DUIs, estate planning, corporate, business, and real estate law. You can find them at budbaylaw.com for more information.
Welcome back to the Kingsman Sports Podcast. Jacob hopping on, and Jacob feeling the holiday spirit a little bit. Yeah. Got the Santa hat. That'll play perfectly into our naughty and nice list here in just a little bit. That is going to be an absolute blast. But we're going to kick things off with our newest edition of Mount Rushmore. It's Cleveland baseball, I guess is what we're going to call it. It's going to encompass any team that's ever played in Cleveland, including the Spiders. There's a lot,
which is different than what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
Like it's a single franchise. So we're encompassing a couple of teams that went defunct very, very early on in baseball.
Yeah. So this one went way back. There was a lot of research put into this one, but I think we did a pretty good job of narrowing down our top four. And then Jacob's got a ton of honorable mentions. I only have three, but
it was really difficult this time around. There were a lot that could have been the fourth. There were a bunch that could have been the fifth. So I'm glad we didn't go out that far, but yeah,
it was definitely, again, so many different variations of the Cleveland baseball team and so many different icons of each one of those teams. So it was really tough. We're going to kick things off with undoubtedly the best pitcher, I guess, in Cleveland baseball, and Bob Feller. Incredible career. Again, we use that for all these guys that we talk about. They all have unbelievable careers, but I mean, for Cleveland, he was just the cream of the crop when it came to pitching. 266 wins with Cleveland, a 3.25 ERA, 1.316 whip, 2,581 strikeouts, 279 complete games, which I know we talk about this. It feels like every week, but the complete game numbers that some of these pitchers have from the older days always just blows my mind. It's crazy to think about that they were just allowed to go out there and throw 9 innings every single day.
This wasn't like 90 pitch complete games either. This was like 150 pitches. You're going until your arm falls off.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, the things that they were allowed to do. Franchise leader in wins, in starts, in innings, complete games, strikeouts, you name it. He was the franchise leader in it. And that's, again, this is a common theme as of late. Missed 3 years of his prime for military service in World War II. And this was right in the middle of his prime. It was like he was a different pitcher before and after even. He got so much better. Won the pitching Triple Crown in 1940 and helped Cleveland win one of their 2 World Series, the modern Cleveland, one of their 2 World Series. So, I mean, when a guy goes out there and you're in a franchise that doesn't just have a ton of world championships, and he was the leader on one of those teams that wins, he's got to be on here. Bob Feller, one of the greatest pitchers to ever do it.
Yeah, and started his MLB career at 17 years old. That is incredible in and of itself. Skipping the minors, sure, but a pitcher to do that and face guy. I know, part of this was dead ball era, sure, but this was a kid facing off against some big names back in the day. Yes. 6 different seasons with more than 20 wins. 8-time All-Star, led the MLB in strikeouts 7 different times, was a top 5 in the MVP race 4 different times. Like you said, won that Triple Crown in 1940, still didn't get the MVP. Ooh, that's rough. He pitched 3 no-hitters, as well as, like you said, bringing that championship to Cleveland. He was just an icon for the team, for the city, and for the game of baseball. He has so many awards named after him. I'm talking about Cleveland awards. I'm talking about baseball awards. I'm talking about minor league and fall league awards. Just so many Bob Feller awards for different levels of sportsmanship and skill. And then, I think you mentioned, but holds the franchise record in wins above replacement, wins, innings pitched, games started, complete games, strikeouts, handful of others. Not even close. Best pitcher in team's history.
Exactly. Yeah, he was special, just a dominant talent. I think he's one of those guys who would transition to a modern day and probably have just as much success. Not the complete games, but still a pretty dominant career. So Bob Feller was a no-brainer.
They've tried to use modern technology to see how fast he was pitching. And the closest they can get, they're thinking it might be 98, it might be 100. They're like, I think he threw 107 once. Like, they used military grade, radar to find miles per hour back then. And it was when it touched home plate, not when it left his hand like modern. So they're thinking he was putting it in there real quick.
Some might say he was slinging it quite well. It was
yes.
Just a really, really special pitcher. Let's move on to number 2. Again, we're in agreement. Nap Lajoie, all-time hitter, and they actually named the team after him. That's where they got the name Cleveland Naps, was after Nap Lajoie. So, I mean, this guy was obviously loved by the front office and by the fans, and he was a heck of a ball player. Hit 339, 389, 452 was a slash line with Cleveland. Only 33 home runs, but 919 RBIs, 408 walks, 2,047 hits, an 840 OPS. Again, just talked about when you have the team named after you. I think he's the only one ever. I feel confident in saying that. I haven't actually done the research, but there's no way any other team has been named after a player, was a player manager for the team from 1905 to 1909. And that's when they played and managed legitimately. They did them both all the time. Franchise leader in at-bats, hits, third in batting average in all-time Cleveland history, won the Triple Crown, which always, I like nailing it into our listeners' heads how great of an achievement that is. That is not easy. Only a handful of players have done it. Nap Lajoie did it. And man, you want to talk about just a pure hitter? That was Nap.
Yes, absolutely. I feel confident in saying he was the first superstar of the American League. I mean, there were court orders that were trying to keep him hostage in the National League. Nothing was going to stop him from joining Cleveland, and he was an immediate success and was absolutely loved by the fans. 13 years in Cleveland. Yeah, like you said, they made him captain, they made him coach, and they made the team name after him. They were trying to go by the Blues or the Bluebirds or the Broncos, or there were a couple, unofficial / slightly official names at the time. And then, nope, it's official. We are going to be the Naps, until he wasn't on the team anymore. That It wasn't even like this is a tribute to our founder who's retired. It's like, nope, this is our team. This is who we got right now.
It's like the Seattle Ichiros in the
Right.
early 2000s. That's what it would have been.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He constantly led the league in various stats throughout his entire career, won a few batting titles, and he's pretty high up on my personal list of favorite French people. It's not a long list. So, and he was, French Canadian, that counts. So, yeah, he's up there.
That might be another Mount Rushmore of our favorite French people.
It is not a long list.
George St. Pierre's got to be on there. He's French Canadian too. So I mean, there's two right away. But it's
easier if you count fictional people. I'll tell you that much.
Way easier.
No. Frenchie from The Boys. Come on, that's great.
You gotta throw his World Cup to Mbappe. Got to be on that list as well. So yeah, we're getting off track. Back to Knapp. He was just a heck of a ball player, a heck of a hitter. And yeah, when you got them trying to do everything to keep him from going to the American League, that hasn't happened many times. I wish it was more of a battle between the American and National League. Now it's, of course, they're a cohesive unit.
It's just conferences. Now that the DH is there, they are just conferences. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I think conferences in like college sports, I think they're a little bit more, battle. We see the SEC.
I'm thinking NFC, AFC conference kind of.
Okay,
thing.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've gotten way off track with Knapp, but he was a no-brainer on this list as well. Our third, I think, was also a no-brainer to the modern era. It's Jim Thome. I mean, this guy was just pure power, was that transition piece from some really, really bad times in Cleveland baseball to making that run in the World Series. 95, the Cleveland team still hate him, but man, Thome kind of powered them there. Hit 287, 414, 566 was his slash line with Cleveland. 337 career home runs with Cleveland, 937 RBIs, 1,008 walks, 1,353 hits, 980 OPS, franchise leader in home runs, and it's not relatively close, really. He had 14 at-bats per home run when he was with Cleveland. And that means once in every 14 at-bats, he was hitting a home run. That was his average. That is just ridiculous to think. Was a silent assassin, never really had the spotlight necessarily on him like some of these superstars we see in today's game and even way back beyond. Just put on his helmet, went to work, hit bombs. That was Jim Thome, and he did it with the best of them.
Yeah. I'm looking at these Rushmore lists, and I feel so spoiled to have grown up watching 90s and early 2000s baseball. Yeah. There was no other time like it. So many players that really represented their teams and made them who that team was to become is from that era. It's such a defining period in baseball, and Jim Thome is just right there alongside all of them. He had, along with those just bonkers of stats, he had 3 All-Star game appearances and a Silver Slugger, which you think, okay, 3 All-Star games, Silver Slugger, okay, that's all right. That is a loaded first base position in the 90s steroid area. To be able to even be in that conversation, you were doing some special things.
Yeah. Remember Frank Thomas we talked about? Yeah, he was there too.
Yeah. And a couple others who we haven't gotten to talk about yet, but yes.
We will.
That we will. 337 of his career 612 Thome runs came in his 13 years with the Tribe franchise record. I mean, you could just go on and on, but he was just that power hitter of the 90s, still doing it the right way. And again, really brightening the outlook of a Cleveland team that had struggled for many, many decades.
Cleveland as a whole, it wasn't just baseball that's kind of been a dark spot in Cleveland. It's been everything. 90s, the Browns were, not too shabby, if I do say so myself, but I mean, they're definitely in a much better spot than they were back in the day. Now we go to our fourth spot where we are different here. This is our lone difference. I went with Washington's own, the Earl of Snohomish, Earl Averill. This guy was sensational, and he was so beloved by this ball club as well, and by really his hometown. Snohomish still loves them some Earl Averill. He hit 322, 399, and 542 for his slash line, 226 home runs, 1,084 RBIs, 1,903 hits, a 940 OPS, which is crazy. Most of those guys you heard of that have hit 940. Franchise leader in runs, total bases, triples. I always love a guy who can hit some triples, and RBIs. In the Hall of Fame, a 6-time All-Star. Just a guy who was, again, one of those guys who just puts on his helmet, goes to work, does his thing, and goes home. That's what he was all about. A really, really fantastic player. Played 11 years with Cleveland, then went elsewhere for a few where he wasn't quite as, eye-popping of numbers. Detroit, he was pretty solid, but Cleveland is where he made his name. And of course, being a Washington guy, he's got to be on one of our Mount Rushmores. He was an incredible player. Just really, really fantastic career for Earl Averill.
Yeah, you mentioned you like seeing a guy being able to hit triples. Averill was definitely on my honorable mentions, but I had to go with the guy whose glove was literally nicknamed the place where triples go to die. And that's Tris Speaker. Gray Eagle was one of the original superstars to start out the 1900s. He had an off year in Boston where he only hit 322, and they wanted him to take a 40% pay cut. So after he refused, they trade him to Boston in what is known as the worst trade deal in Boston history. Yes, even worse than letting Babe Ruth go. Most fans and experts are like, nah, this was the one. Babe Ruth was pretty much a no one when we traded him. Yeah, hindsight 2020, that's awful. This guy was a bona fide superstar, and we knew, and we let him to walk. So he followed that up, going 354, 444, 520 with Cleveland, 73 home runs. And again, these home run totals that we're saying back in the day seem low. This was dead ball era. This was a completely different ball game. You didn't see home runs back then. 886 runs batted in, 857 walks, 1,965 hits, and 74.8 wins above replacement. Just incredible. He stole the batting title from Ty Cobb in 1916. First person to do that in 10 years. And yes, that was the year that Boston traded him. So Cleveland was very happy with their immediate dividends there. He was also a player manager, and he actually invented the platoon system that we use in baseball to rotate guys in and out. He helped Cleveland win their first World Series as a player manager as well. And he holds a huge number of franchise records to this day. He also holds quite a few MLB records. He leads all of baseball in career doubles, 486 of them coming from his time in Cleveland. He also leads the MLB in double plays by an outfielder with 143. Now, that was a little harder to figure out how many came from in which year, but a lot of them did, just so you're aware. He also has 6 unassisted double plays as an outfielder. Now, picture that. An unassisted double play means you are getting the put out and catching a ball and tagging a runner out on your own, basically. How does one do that in the outfield? Well, he did it by playing so shallow and catching balls on the run that he would get the runner out at second base on the tag. Just ridiculous. He also got quite a few outs on bunts as an outfielder. So he was going all around the place. Just one of the greatest to ever do it, hitting and fielding wise. There was no question in it. He had to be my number 4.
using the term outfielder for him, you got to be a little loose with it because literally he was all over the field on some of these plays. He was literally could cover everything. He was on my honorable mention for sure. This one we're getting into that territory where every single one is very, very difficult, but we had the one difference this week. Again, our Mount Rushmore, Bob Feller, Nap Lajoie, Jim Thome, and I had Cliff Averill, and you had Feller, Lajoie, Thome, and Tris Speaker. So, I mean, right there, you have so much talent. That doesn't even include the guys on our honorable mentions. I had Speaker, Kenny Lofton, who was one of those guys I watched growing up, sensational outfielder, and Omar Vizquel, who I didn't anticipate even having on this list. But man, just the way he was adored in Cleveland in his time, I never really wrapped my head around it. He was really beloved, so I think he deserved an honorable mention spot as well. Jacob, I'm going to go grab a snack while you read off your honorable mention list. Go ahead.
There are so many. My goodness. So I did have Averill, as I mentioned. Also had Kenny Lofton. We're probably a little 90s biased, but I was really trying hard to fit him into the top four. I couldn't quite do it with the skill, but the best base stealer of his time, helped a lot of runs cross home plate for the Indians, and had the most service time in his career with Cleveland. The others, it was 1 or 2 years at a time. So just not quite there compared to some of the others. Lou Boudreau had an MVP in 8 All-Star appearances, won a batting title and a World Series in Cleveland as well. But he also invented the shift, so he's kind of on my naughty list. We'll go over that later on. Larry Doby, of course, the American League's Jackie Robinson. 3 months after the Dodgers signed Robinson, the Indians signed Doby. He skipped the minors entirely, 7 straight All-Star games. He and Satchel Paige were the first Black players to ever win a World Series. They did it with Cleveland in 48. And you ask a lot of players of the time, they will all tell you, Doby, better baseball player than Jackie. So, we'll see how it all stacks out. But he was definitely on there. I had Cy Young. Cleveland Spiders don't get a lot of love. They went defunct. Not even, the same franchise as the Naps, the Indians, the Guardians. But he was a huge part of Cleveland baseball, has the award for best pitcher named after him. So had to put him somewhere. And then Sandy Alomar Jr., Rookie of the Year, 6-time All-Star, Gold Glove, 11 years with the team. Did a lot of good stuff, and then he is a beloved coach too, so had to put him somewhere. But yeah, that was a really, really hard one to do.
Yeah, Alomar still first base coach, I believe, for Cleveland. I believe I saw him there this year. Yeah, so Cleveland, not a great history of championships, but a pretty good roster of players on their franchise history. So it's been, again, one of those ones that was really, really tough that entire way, but we somehow were able to narrow it down to 4. Again, there will be a poll, so let us know who you think got it right and who you think might have whiffed, or if we both whiffed, let us know who you think should have been in that 4 spot. Next week, we are staying in the AL Central. We got the Detroit Tigers coming up. That is going to be another fun one. Have a feeling we're going to see some modern era players on that list as well. So Tigers, it is not going to be easy.
And some really old players too. One comes to mind in particular.
Immediately. But that'll be coming up next week on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. We got one more segment coming up. We're kind of wrapping up the year again. Last episode, won't have one next week of 2022. We got some naughty and nice lists. Jacob and I are going to go through who deserves a little bit of praise this year and who does not. That's coming up next year on the Kingsman Sports Podcast.
Cheap insurance is nice, but none of that matters if your insurance company isn't there when you need them most. When you are looking for a trusted insurance company, well, it's our name, Clear Choice Insurance. We represent multiple companies to get you the best possible price and coverage for home, car, and business plans. The Clear Choice Pros will craft the perfect plan to fit your needs and budget. Check us out at clearchoiceinsurance.us. Make the clear choice with Clear Choice Insurance.
High school sports fans, relive your favorite moments. Just click the shopping cart below the video player to get your digital copy today.
Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Again, I am Matthew King, Jacob Sullivan, sticking around for the final segment of our first calendar year, I guess, doing the Kingsmen Sports Podcast here in 2022. The very last episode, which means it's the holiday season, and that means Santa's got his naughty and nice list. So Jacob and I, we put our own together in the sports world. We came up with 5 naughty. We also have 6 nice, some of them a little bit personal. Again, this is our personal list, so there's going to be some personal things going on here. We're going to rotate back and forth, 1 and 1. That'll allow us to catch our breaths while we're explaining
I like it.
Our reasoning. So we are going to start off with the naughty. We figured it'd be better to end the year on a high note with the nice list. So we're going to start off with the naughty, and I believe I will go ahead and start with the FIFA World Cup. Now, it was an incredible tournament on the field. So much great happening. The World Cup final was the greatest soccer match of all time. Just unbelievable. But the way FIFA handled it, the way Qatar handled it, it was just a disaster. You know, from the last little things like last second saying, oh, we're not selling beer, by the way, not letting people wear the clothes that they want into the stadium, and the passing of Grant Wall, which we won't dig too much into that because of what his wife said, so we are going to leave that one alone. But it was just, it never felt like the World Cup. First of all, having it in winter felt weird. It was just, the whole thing, from the time it was announced that Qatar was hosting it, the whole thing felt sketchy, felt slimy, and once the games got here, it didn't get any better. Things were weird. Again, I don't want to say never have it in a country like that again. I hope that one day we will be able to, where people just, you know, let everyone bring their own cultures into that country. Really, and that's what's so great about the World Cup, is every single game, it's 2 different cultures meeting together and competing. It is just an absolute blast. This one just was not that. So disappointed in FIFA. Incredible tournament, but the whole situation surrounding it was just not good.
Yeah. I didn't go that deep in my first one, but I get it. My first on the naughty list, and just so you guys are aware, players, leagues, teams, anything. So my first one is a player, and that's Fernando Tatis Jr. I've mentioned him a few times this year on the podcast, and he got paid quite a bit of money to not be playing baseball. First, the accident, and you can argue about, you know, is he in his team's best interest doing silly things like that? And then there was the getting popped for steroids and that big no-no. His team seems to be creating some separation there. He is no longer the face of MLB or even San Diego, and he has some work to do to be able to be looked at in a positive light this next year.
Yeah, I mean, Manny Machado's now looking at leaving San Diego as well after this season. I think everything's kind of snowballed out of control. And it all started with Tatis and that one bad haircut. It's just an absolute shame that had to happen.
Do it.
I'm going to stay with the player, and this one is a no-brainer, and I could just say the name and leave it at that. Antonio Brown. This guy is just a disgrace to not just football, but to humans. I mean, the year this guy's had, remember, it started off by him walking off the field in that Bucks-Jets game. That was in 2022. That's when he walked off the field. It just never got better. He needs some serious help. I don't know if it's got to be something with concussions, the CTE. Something isn't right with Antonio Brown, and I really hope he does get the help. But just all the crazy things he was doing this year, all the way from, you know, that disgraceful exit to his rap career to now what he's doing with Tom Brady and Giselle. It is just absolutely disgusting, and I don't think there's anyone who really has any respect left for Antonio Brown.
Yeah, that really is unfortunate, especially given the fact that when he got to Tampa Bay, Tom really took him under his wing. Now, I'm not the biggest Tom Brady fan, but he really was coaching him almost and saying, you had some issues there in Pittsburgh. We're going to bring you in and we're going to make sure that everything is good for you. And it just, that's
Tom
been rough.
Brady goes all out for his teammates. That's something that you don't have to like get, but man, he does whatever he can to help his teammates.
Yeah. So my next on the naughty list, kind of player, kind of team, kind of league, the entire Deshaun Watson situation has been naughty to say the least. What he did, very naughty, not okay. It's not going away. There's just more and more stuff coming up all the time, and it's not looking good. The suspension was made into more of a sales publicity stunt than any kind of actual disciplinary action. I mean, WWE could have wrote that script on, oh, this is a bad guy, but he got re-signed and now he's facing his old team, and what are we gonna do? Shame on everybody for that entire situation. Shame on the Browns for signing him, knowing that he was going to be facing a suspension and building the contract to do that. Shame on the Browns Jacoby Brissett was looking pretty darn good this year. I know you just paid Deshaun a lot of money, but shame on everyone for that in that entire situation.
Yeah, an absolute disaster from the very get-go, 100%. We kind of went the low-hanging fruit onto those two. There's no question that those two were going to pop up on ours. Number 3 I have for my naughty list is another fiasco between two leagues, same sport. It's the PGA and Live Tour fiasco. This was just a mess, and I think both sides need to share a little bit of the blame. The Live Tour, of course, the new Saudi Arabia golf league, they're going around the world. They're paying players a lot more money than the PGA was and giving them a lot more time off. I think the way they went about getting those players was kind of a little bit dirty and just kind of stealing them from the PGA. But I don't think the PGA was, no guilt there, because the way they handled by saying, okay, you go over there, you're done with the PGA. You can't come back. You're absolutely done. And to just write legends off like Phil Mickelson, for example, all of a sudden gone from the PGA to some really great golfers that all of a sudden the PGA Tour says, no, we're done with you. There was a way to work around that and say, okay, we have tournaments every single week of the year. You can go over and play in the Live Tour for, one, because golfers in the PGA Tour, they don't play in every single PGA Tour event, not even close to them. So I just think they could have handled it a bit better and had those guys come back for some of the bigger events and really let them compete still. Because PGA Tour is still the highest level of golf. There's no question about it.
For sure. My next one, I kind of went a little more personal. Jerry DiPoto and John Stanton. I know 2022 was a big step in the right direction, and a lot of fans are looking to build off of that here in Seattle baseball. And to spend a whole whopping $1.2 million this offseason with some pretty clear holes to fill in your lineup, that is naughty to say the least. I was really hoping, especially with where we're sitting as far as trade ability is concerned, you're giving yourself one heck of a handicap by not even really putting any effort towards free agency. I'm not saying that you can sign Judge and Correa and Turner. I mean, you can't get everybody, but at least to be in the conversation with a couple of big names that are actually going to make a difference in a lineup with holes in it still. I mean, you have more holes in it than you did at the beginning of the offseason, in my opinion. So I know we made some trades, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we're able to do, but that was a bit of a disappointment to see that they weren't willing to cough up some money and spend to bring some success here to Seattle.
Now, I disagree with that take. I think that you got to look at what the Mariners did during last season as addressing some needs.
Definitely.
Luis Castillo being extended is massive for this team. Of course, the Julio deal, that's franchise defining. But I mean, the Mariners offseason hasn't been bad. They got Teoscar Hernandez. They didn't have to spend. They made a trade that I don't think necessarily hurts them. They got Colton Wong in a trade that I think definitely,
both sides
get rid of a player that they need. But it helped everyone. And Trevor Gott's a really good reliever. He's Eric Swanson-esque. So, I mean, some of these guys, they didn't get the big flashy splash signing, of course, but I think they did a lot to improve this ball club. And I mean,
I don't think they did a lot to improve. I think that they did enough to stay even. I mean, if you look at our bullpen of last year to our bullpen of this year, I don't think we lost ground. But Gott did not give us a lot of improvement as compared to last year. You look at Colton Wong. Yeah. You look at Colton Wong. You look at Colton Wong, and you're hoping he does better than Adam Frazier, because Adam Frazier had a very poor year as far as Adam Frazier goes last year. But it's not going to improve. You're not going to get 10 more wins because of Colton Wong than you are from. You disagree with that? You think Colton Wong is 10 wins above Adam Frazier?
I think Colton Wong might be 10 wins above guys who are filling in for that spot, like Abraham Toro. Remember, Frazier did not play a lot of second base. He played a lot of outfield last season. Second base,
which is going to be my biggest issue, is letting Mitch Haniger go. Teoscar, great. I'm good with that. But we thought we had a very, very strong outfield presence last year, and that was going to be our strength going in, and our outfield weakness was going to be, who do we sit today? That was not the case, and there were a lot of good opportunities in the free agency market to improve that outfield, and I don't think they were even looking.
Here's where I'm going to disagree with Jerry DiPoto, because I know who's going to play left field opening day next season. And I know who it should be playing left field opening day next season. It should be Sam Haggerty. There's no question about it. But man, Teoscar Hernandez, I don't know if you necessarily, is he a little bit better than Mitch was because he's going to be on the field? Is that what it comes down to? If he stays healthy and can put up the Mitch numbers, that's an improvement. Exactly. A lot cheaper compared to what the Giants got. I don't think the Mariners were going to come close to that number. And the move that I still look at is this Luis Castillo. They hit a home run. Remember, it was Luis Castillo was one of the big fish in the trade market, and the other one was Frankie Montas.
We gave up a lot for him. I'm not saying that 100%. Trade was not worth it. I'm saying there are opportunities to build your team by spending money and keeping your farm system that we didn't even really attempt a swing at this year.
So let me ask you this. Are you more comfortable in not extending Luis Castillo, which is where they spent their money, 100%, not trading for him, keeping those prospects, and just rolling with the team that the Mariners had down the stretch last season? You think they still make the playoffs there, and then you can go sign pitchers in the free agent market?
I think that, you could have saved a little more money maybe by not extending him quite as long and keeping him around still, seeing how things play out and having some more money to spend. But I also think, Mariners are, I think I was reading 17th in money spending, and they're better than some of the teams who have no vision of where they want to go, but they are nowhere near the teams who do. Don't get me wrong. The Mets are just dwarfing everyone this year. That is ridiculous the amount of money that they're spending. But there's a middle ground there that 15 other teams have found, and they are figuring out that it works, and they're getting to the playoffs with their big contracts. And I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but you at least got to throw some money around. Otherwise, you're not going to have a farm system, and you're not going to have a winning team.
I think the Mariners are still in a pretty good spot farm system wise, and they got one of the best pitchers in all of baseball, Luis Castillo. We'll save the rest of this for a Mariners mini coming up. We got an off-season one that's going to be coming up. Let's keep going with our naughty list. We got a little carried away with that one. I'm going to move to one that's personal to me, and that's USC and UCLA leaving the Pac-12, which is just college sports as a whole are turning into just a money chase. The NIL deal, the transfer portal, everything is just changed. What was so great about college sports, USC and UCLA leaving the Pac-12 is the one. You can go to Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12 as well. I think that one is equal footing with this. But I mean, that's two teams that are in California, in LA, that are going to be playing in the Big 10 where they're going to Iowa, Wisconsin. I mean, what are even conferences anymore if it's not, geographical location? It just makes no sense. It's a money grab for those schools. Yep. They're trying to get back to that prom. But guess what? They haven't been that successful in the Pac-12 realm of sports. UCLA basketball is back. USC football looks like they're on their way back. But I mean, over the last decade, haven't really done much regardless of the sport. It's just baffling that they're looked upon just because they're in LA as the foundation of the Pac-12. I don't think the Pac-12 is dying. Remember, who won the Pac-12 football championship this year? Utah. It wasn't one of those schools. So it baffles me that they're going out there chasing this money thinking they're all high and mighty when the rest of the Pac-12 has kind of been carrying them over the last decade.
It's fair. No, I'm keeping with the personal GM/owner. And my Colts, Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard. Yeah, both of my team's owners and GMs are on the naughty list. Irsay needs to figure out what he wants to do with this team, because letting Chris just try a different hand-me-down struggling veteran quarterback every year is not working. We need some goals other than crossing our fingers and hoping that somebody returns back to form, because JT looking to be out the rest of this year. You don't want your prize running back to be hurt and you not have a throwing game of any sort. This defense was supposed to be one of the best in the league. They get turnovers every once in a while, but they get marched on in the same exact game. And then this offensive line that was supposed to be one of the best in the league, quarterbacks getting pressured, I think bottom 5. It's horrible. It's not looking good. And all they're doing is rotating out coaches as if that's the issue. It's part of the issue. But what is a coach going to do with the talent that you put on that team? You have got to figure out what you want to do. It starts with a franchise quarterback, and it can't be somebody's franchise quarterback from 15 years ago. You can't do that and win football games. So I'm hoping / thinking that it's finally time. Ballard should be gone at the end of this year. Man, I wish you could fire an owner. I really do. Jim, go buy your guitars for $10 million a piece and go hang out at, the NASCAR shows and just be done with football and let somebody who actually wants to see a successful team in Indy come back.
All right. Now, I'm not going to debate anything you just said. I will say that I am looking forward to Tom Brady being a Colt next season. That is going to be a blast to watch. I'll move to my last.
He'll have to fight Nick Foles for it, I bet, but.
Let's move on to my last naughty. And this one's a little bit different. It's not that anyone did anything wrong. It's about a sport, and it's just the sport is worse off going into 2023, and that is tennis. Now, I'm not a massive tennis watcher, so this one really speaks to me. Serena Williams and Roger Federer both retiring. Again, they're at the spots and they have nothing left to prove. But for just the, average person who hears about tennis here, that's two massive stars walking away from a sport that really doesn't have too many up and coming stars. So, I mean, I don't really have a comparison to another sport losing two guys like that or two players like that and not having the replacements. But it's kind of, It'd be like if Tom Brady and Peyton Manning walked away at the same time and there weren't any exciting young quarterbacks.
I was going to say, there's so many more exciting. It'd be like if Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson retired in their prime and nobody else was there,
I bet you the tennis community is going to be like, oh, but there's so many of these young players. If they can't draw in the average fans, they're not that superstar, and you're going to be losing some viewers. So it's just tennis. Hopefully they've got some players on the way that can really bring average tennis, I guess, fans. Fans not the right. Average tennis listen. I don't even know how to explain it, but bring eyes back to the sport.
Right. Have people pay attention. So my last one, again, kind of personal. It's the Astros. They might always be on my naughty list. I don't like the Astros. I don't think Santa likes the Astros. I'll be honest with you.
No,
and they never stop cheating. Whether it's Valdez with his foreign substances, whether it's Diaz leaning into his pitches crap. I mean, that entire playoffs World Series, Maldonado with his illegal bat. I know it wasn't a statistical advantage, but these guys, they just break every single rule there is. Stealing more signs, they were banging on the dugout now as players. Can they just play baseball? Can they just play baseball normally and not break rules? That would be great. I feel like that would just be a game changer in the entire MLB.
I'm looking forward to Astros fans coming after you on social medias. It's going to be an absolute blast to watch that.
Come visit.
That'll do it for the naughty portion. Let's go ahead and end the year. Let's look at our nice list. And these ones are going to be a little bit more enjoyable.
Yeah.
All right. My first nice list is Sam Ryder and Carlos Ortiz. Now, I bet you every single person listening to this is like, I'm sorry, who? These are two golfers who both hit a hole-in-one on the 16th hole of the Waste Management Open in Phoenix. And I bet you guys are starting to put the pieces together. It is the most exciting hole in all of golf, where if you get a hole-in-one, the fans that are surrounding this hole go absolute bananas, throw their beers, throw their drinks onto the course, and it is the most electrifying thing that you will ever see in sports. It is absolutely incredible. Please, in sports, I'm going to go ahead and stand by that. Please go look it up, because if you're there, you're going bonkers, and that has to just be thrilling. It was one of the greatest moments of the year, period. End of story.
I think my guy beats that as far as electricity in sports.
He doesn't.
He does, and it's Messi. The greatest soccer player of this generation scored 7 goals to help his country win the World Cup. Did you see the video of the victory parade in Buenos Aires?
Yeah.
That's electricity right
people.
there. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen that many people in one place at one time, ever, for anything, sports related or not. It actually doesn't look real.
Yeah.
That win meant a lot to a lot of people. His championship picture is now officially the most liked picture on Instagram of all time. 68 million likes. That is,
it beat the egg.
It beat the egg. It beat the Kardashians. It beat everything. Just what a huge moment in sports. I mean, they had to get the team out of the parade by helicopter because there were so many people there just going crazy. That's not just throwing beer. That's a big moment in sports. Good for him.
You want to know how you know that's a big moment? Jacob doesn't watch soccer, and he's fired up about Messi. It was incredible.
I kept up to date on the World Cup pretty good.
How many games did you watch?
I mean, it's Mexico. They're on all over the place. Every mall we went to, we'd hang out and get some slices of pizza or something. And okay, which game? Oh, ooh, Argentina and Mexico. Oof, guys. Good luck.
It wasn't a good World Cup for Mexico. We will say that. But
No.
let's move on. My next nice list is the Golden State Warriors. And I know they've been a dynasty, but they had fallen off. But Klay Thompson coming back, he's a Coug, so he's got a special place in my heart. And Steph Curry as well. These guys came back from it looked like they were going to be a laughing stock, go out there, getting too old. They come back and they win an NBA Finals. I think everyone forgot just how good Steph was and how great of a shooter Klay Thompson is. And they've got a bunch of up-and-comers in Jordan Poole. They still got Draymond Green. Andrew Wiggins looked like a whole new player. Just the Warriors felt like they were officially back. This season's not going quite as great, but it's not a disaster. But it was just great to see those guys battle back, persevere through some really bad times and prove, no, we're still pretty good basketball players. And it was nice to see the Warriors get that championship again.
For sure. My second one goes out to Aaron Judge. I mean, after one of the greatest seasons in the history of baseball, the guy comes back to New York with other teams even outbidding them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I kind of wish he went elsewhere. It would have done my heart good to see him maybe in the National League. I know Giants were feeling real confident there for a while. I think Dodgers were sweating a little bit, but good for him. Good for the fans of the Yankees. I know. I didn't say I'm happy for them. I said good for them. They would have been very, very lost. That city would have been lost without that Judge.
Good. Anyway, I'm not even going to say anything nice about the Yankees at all. We'll move right into my next nice. My next nice was a pretty great story as well. The St. Peter's Peacocks stole the show in March Madness. And what was Coach Krzyzewski's last March Madness, last tournament coaching Duke? It was the St. Peter's Peacocks that took all the headline from him. The first 15 seed to make it to the Elite Eight, and they were incredible. They had everyone rooting for them by the end of things. It was so great. It was just a fun story. It's not too often you see a 15 seed go on a run like that. You normally see maybe a 12 seed or somewhere, but for them to not only do that, but to knock off some blue bloods as well. Remember, they started that run by beating Kentucky, who was supposed to win the national championship last year.
A lot of people's brackets were thrown in the trash after that game.
Yeah, Doug Eddert. I mean, come on. Everyone knows the Doug Eddert mustache by now. It was just it was awesome to see. Just the scrappy. It reminded me of Florida Gulf Coast from years back. It's great to have that Cinderella story every few years in college basketball. And the Peacocks, they did it. You got to let them spread their wings and fly. St. Peter's, incredible show.
Yeah, absolutely. I got another Cinderella here. He's got some ugly stepsisters, and it's Brock Purdy. Because Mr. Irrelevant was really thrust into some big positions there in San Francisco. They're having a pretty good year, clinched now. And he's a third string. He's not a backup. He is a third string. Wasn't even on an official game ready roster at the beginning of the year. And he's performing a lot better than quite a few teams' first strings are. I mean, I wish the Colts would have drafted him last pick of the draft. That would have been pretty nice. But yeah, good for Brock. I mean, it's actually cool to see.
I think I'm not so sure what Purdy would do on another team. I think he's the perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan's system.
Yeah.
It makes me scratch my head even more. Like, why did they draft Trey Lance? What were they thinking? Why'd they trade up? Anyway, we won't touch that one. It's a mystery. My next one is the greatest. It's been the greatest 2 years for this sports team, and nobody talks about it. No, it's not the Tampa Bay Lightning, who had a pretty good couple of years. No, it's not the Kansas City Chiefs, who, are right there every single year. They're in the golden era of their sports. Not the Dodgers, who finally got that World Series and then put up another record year. I'm talking about Oklahoma softball. The Sooners had a 56-4 record in 2021, won the national championship. You're thinking, well, that's a pretty great year. You're not going to get better than that. They did in 2022 when they went 59-3 and won another national championship. This team hit nothing but bombs all the way through the season. Nobody even talks about the Women's College World Series. Oklahoma, they're a big part of that because everyone knew coming in, this team is just head and shoulders better than everyone. Shout out to the Sooners. They were incredible the last couple of years. One of the best 2-year runs in any sport in a long, long time.
Yeah. I kind of cool that they lined up like this. I also have someone from the WNBA that doesn't, get a lot of recognition. Sue Bird. No relation to Larry Bird, but looks like a female incarnate. I'll be honest with you. She had a very special 21-year career with the Seattle Storm. You see the little girl giving her a flower mid-game. She's like,
in the middle of a game,
this, sweetie. Like, I have a game to play, but thank you.
You got
Thank
business.
you. It was a very cool year for her, a very cool farewell tour.
Yeah, she's an icon, especially when it comes to Seattle sports. A lot of people only look at the big sports. The Storm were kind of a powerhouse in the WNBA. Them and the Sounders were what we're bringing championships to Seattle. So, yeah, Sue Bird, unbelievable career. There will never be anyone quite like her ever again. My next one is a little bit of a downer. This one's a little bit personal. Mike Leach. Of course, Mike Leach just recently passed away last week. Passed away on my birthday, not the way I wanted that to end. But man, this guy
born on your birthday, so
it's true. Puppy's born on my birthday, so it balances out. Not quite, but I mean, at the same time, at least there is some positive there too. But yeah, Mike Leach, incredible coach, incredible person. Just you don't hear many people say bad things unless it's Texas Tech, where he took them from doormat of the Big 12 to conference champion. But what he did at Washington State, Wazoo was in a terrible spot before Mike Leach came in, and now they're going to a bowl game every single year. He looked like he was turning around Mississippi State into SEC title contenders. They finished the season ranked. And just the stories that are told about Mike Leach, whether it's him getting that mustache from Gardner Minshew after that big win against Colorado back in 2018, or my favorite story that I heard recently was when he tricked the Texas Longhorns when he was an assistant at Oklahoma and had one of his players drop a sheet of scripted plays that had all the plays flipped. So the defense would move to one way and they'd run the play the other way, and it got up 17-0 before they realized what was happening. So just little things like that are what make Mike Leach so great. So rest in peace to the Pirate, and thank you for all you did for college football.
Yeah, my next one's pretty personal as well, but it's more of a happy personal. And I think he should be on every single nice list in this entire country.
Ever.
And that's Julio Rodriguez. This kid has reignited the city of Seattle and Mariner fandom. You were talking about the Castillo signing being huge. This one, I am A-okay with spending every single penny here. From the show he put on in the All-Star break to his Silver Slugger 25-25 club rookie of the year season, to just his general lovability. I mean, he is a kid playing a game, and it is so fun to watch. He has a chance to be the true face of the game coming up. I mean, you saw the national publicity he got. You saw some other potential faces of the game not acting like faces of the game. Yeah. And so Chico is going places. He is also not going places because of that monster contract. He will be firmly residing in Seattle baseball for up to 12 years. So I'm really excited to see what's going to happen there. And yes, nice list. He can have whatever he wants for Christmas.
What's he going to be, like 34 when that contract expires? That's ridiculous. He's so young. It's I can't wait to watch him play baseball. Yeah, you mentioned he's a kid playing baseball. He loves every second. And the fact that he's getting fans from other cities because he goes out and signs autographs for anyone, no matter where he's at, every single day. The smile on his face, the interaction with the fans. He's what everyone wanted
Never
to be.
change, Julio.
It feels like he is going to be the face of baseball. He's what's great about the sport. Definite Ken Griffey Jr. vibes. I know that's lofty already, but man, it's there. Trust me.
So far.
Hopefully he continues on that trajectory.
Yep.
Now we're going to end. We had one similarity on both of our lists combined. So we're going to end with this similarity, and it was someone who went out as he should. Albert Pujols is our final nice list. The final thing we're going to talk about here in 2022. Just his entire career was outstanding. He was never problematic, just did his thing. Again, one of the quiet superstars. And it looked like, he was going to be on his way out. He's going to go out on his shield, just short of 700 home runs. And then he reignited everything. He refound everything that made Albert Pujols the machine. Goes on a home run tear, gets to 700, gets to do it for the Cardinals at Dodger Stadium, where he had a pretty good second half of last season as well. Awesome to see Albert Pujols again, always have a smile on his face, and his home run derby round one upset. So seeing him just make it to round two, it was a dream year for Albert Pujols. Yeah, he didn't get a walk away with the World Series, but watching him, Yachty, and Wainwright walk off the field together, oh man, special stuff for Pujols. An incredible career. Glad that I was able to watch him in person a few times, even once with the Cardinals.
Yeah. One of the most storybook career endings I've ever seen. You mentioned it. I mean, the last few years, he's been in a couple different California teams, and it was more of a veteran presence, DH to come in and hopefully stay about replacement. And then to go back to the team that he started with, and I don't know what happened. It's pixie dust or something, because that was a very, very cool season to watch. He hit the 700. I do really wish that the Cards went deeper in the playoffs. That would have been really special. But still, I mean, you just can't say enough about how special of a year it was for Albert in his going away tour.
Yeah, incredible year. We wish Albert Pujols the happiest retirement. And that's going to do it for our naughty and nice list. And that is going to do it for the Kingsmen here in 2022. We want to thank you guys so much for sticking with us all year. And we got a lot of exciting things coming next year. Let us know if you like this naughty and nice list, kind of a little different thing to have. Maybe we'll try and incorporate stuff like this a little bit more often, some fun stuff going on. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. I want to thank Tristen and Jacob for both hopping on once again. And I am so excited for y'all to see what we have coming in 2023. We will be back at it the first week in January. Stick around. You're not going to want to miss what's coming on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast next year.